All right, so let's go back to 2018 in Cleveland, Ohio. A young rapper by the name of Q Money was really setting the industry on fire. He had a single called Work, and he went viral with it, earning millions of views. Then his follow up, Neat, stamped him as a star on the rise. Now, at this time, labels were crawling, but he linked up with Think It's a Game Entertainment out there in Atlanta, even though he was from Ohio. Now, the fans were watching, most of the South was watching, a lot of people had big aspirations for Q Money. Now, Cleveland had finally had its big next name in the rap game. But just 1 year later, Q Money's name wasn't making headlines for music at all. It was tied to a brutal crime scene in Decatur, Georgia, a crime that left one man dead, full with bullet holes, and a family shattered, and a rising career destroyed. Qamar Williams, also known as Q Money, grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. His sound was raw and energetic and playful. It made him stand out in the late 2010s wave of viral rap. He was one of those guys who was hip to doing dance moves and making dance sequences of his own within his own music. With his breakout track Work racking up millions of views, Q Money wasn't just a hometown hero, he was on the brink of breaking out in the nation. You could see clips of him opening up for 6ix9ine and other artists of that same ilk. Artists like DaBaby, YFN Lucci also showed him love. Now, at the time, Q Money was getting a lot of publicity, and you had even the local news there in Cleveland spotlighting him on news segments, talking about he's going to be the next thing since Bone Thugs and Harmony. Now, Bone Thugs and Harmony being the group famously from Cleveland that took over rap music for a nice period of time there, man, in the 1990s. The only issue with Q Money is his story would take a dark turn. On April 15th, 2019, a night that would forever change the course of Q Money's life, the Cleveland rapper was in Decatur, Georgia, staying in a home with friends. Among them was a fellow Cleveland native by the name of Calvin Chappelle, someone Q Money had known for years. But what started as just another night going out together ended in bloodshed. Prosecutors said Q Money entered the room when Chappelle slept on an air mattress and fired multiple shots at point-blank range. The chilling part, the entire scene was captured on a home surveillance camera. Investigators alleged that Q Money tried to disable those cameras just moments before pulling the trigger and later called a friend begging them to delete the footage. Now, it's one thing to get into a shootout, but it's another thing to shoot a guy while he's asleep, especially when you hear that the reports say that there was no issue between him and Q Money initially to start the whole altercation. The guy is laying there asleep, and this is what alleged in court, that Q Money came in and shot him multiple times, including in the head. When police arrived at the scene, they found Chappelle dead on an air mattress. Witnesses in the house described chaos and confusion. One said they woke up to gunshots. Another recalled Q Money pacing, saying he had to protect himself. To prosecutors, it looked less like fear and more like premeditation. The wild part about it is they had been out at the nightclub just before this. Q Money had separated himself and went to get something to eat, and then everybody else in the house had went to sleep. And after the shooting, Q Money fled the scene and then later turned himself in. And from then on, the investigation began. Q Money was locked up, awaiting trial. At trial, the state of Georgia built a devastating case. Prosecutors leaned heavily on the surveillance video from inside the home, showing Q Money entering the room, gun in hand. They highlighted his alleged attempts to tamper with evidence, first trying to cut the cameras, then by calling others to erase the files. So basically, they had Q Money dead to rights. They had a video of him committing the act, and they showed that he tried to cover up the act afterwards instead of waiting for police to show up if it was a real self-defense situation or turning himself into police and calling the police himself. You know, this is just all bad for Q Money. They also pointed to the brutality of the act. Multiple shots fired into the man who was asleep and unarmed. For the jury, it painted a picture of cold-blooded murder, and it wasn't too hard to guess what the verdict was going to come back as. But there was going to be a waiting period because the trial has to carry on like it should, even with the mountain of evidence against Q Money. On September 23rd, 2023, after days of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Q Money was found guilty on all major counts: malice, murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. With the verdict back, it was clear that Q Money was cooked. The ruling was clear. The young rapper's claim of self-defense didn't match the evidence. Overnight, one of rap's rising stars went from viral success to a life sentence. A career once defined by breakout hits like Work and Neat, now overshadowed by a conviction that will follow him forever. Now, this isn't to say that Q Money's legal team didn't try to put up a defense, but even as prosecutors painted Q Money as a cold-blooded killer, his defense and his family told a different story. They argued that what happened in that Decatur home wasn't premeditated murder, but the tragic outcome of a young man spiraling after a night of drinking. Now, it's wild to use that as your defense when you clearly have a video of him shooting the victim and trying to cover up the evidence. Now, new testimony placed Q Money at a Waffle House around the time of the shooting. Witnesses described him looking visibly unwell, stumbling, sweating, and spending nearly 20 minutes in the bathroom after ordering food he never touched. Employees recalled asking if he was okay, while his companions noticed he wasn't acting normal at all. Now, that very same witness testimony has been circulating online and gaining a lot of suspicion about Q Money's case. It has a lot of people thinking that he might have an opportunity to beat this on appeal. But it seems like these rumors come out every year around Q Money. Now, to the defense, this raised questions. Was Q Money in the right state of mind that night? Could his condition explain the chaos that followed? His family insists he was set up, that the surveillance footage was tampered with, and that the story prosecutors told was only part of the truth. Outside the courtroom, his supporters echoed these claims, pointing to his character, his loyalty to his friends, and his career on the rise. To them, Qamar Williams was not a murderer, but a young rap artist trapped in a nightmare. Now, on the surface, this seems like a nightmare because according to his friends and family, he was out enjoying the night with those same friends that were in that house, but he separated himself, went to Waffle House to get him something to eat. You know, normal after the club type of tradition stuff, right? But they're alleging, and a lot of people, the rumor on the street is that he was drugged that night. That's what made him come back to the house and act erratically and shoot his friend. Now, that's a stretch because somebody did lose their life and somebody's always going to pay the price for that. But outside the courtroom, his supporters echoed these claims, pointing to his character, his loyalty to friends, and his career on the rise. To them, Qamar Williams is not a murderer. Now, since the trial unfolded, there's been a lot of debate about what would cause a rising rap star to commit such an act. Now, the internet lit up with theories and paperwork that fueled this debate. Some documents suggested inconsistencies in the timeline, adding weight to the Waffle House testimony that Q Money wasn't even at the house when Calvin Chappelle was killed. On social media, hashtags like Free Q Money trended as fans argued the case against him wasn't airtight. Blogs and hip-hop outlets dissected every leak. Was the video manipulated? Were key witnesses pressured? And most importantly, if he was at Waffle House, how could he have pulled the trigger? Now, these are all valid questions, to be real with you. And if you're looking at a life sentence, you've been sentenced to life plus 15 without a possibility for parole, you'll use anything you can to probably get free. And I'm not saying that these claims aren't valid, but still, the jury's verdict spoke louder than the rumors. Q Money was convicted on all counts, but in the hip-hop community, the conversation has never ended. For a lot of rap fans, he remains a cautionary tale, an artist whose rise was cut short by a crime he swears he didn't commit. And that's a horrible situation, especially if some of those claims that he might have been drugged are true, because then he'd be acting not in his right state of mind. He'd be doing something because he was in a drug-induced state, which I don't know lends claims to him getting maybe an appeal or having some sort of way of getting out of this situation, but that seems pretty hard to prove 7-8 years later down the road. Now, for others, the doubts and the paperwork leave one lingering question. Was justice really served? And for Q Money, his family, friends, and everybody who was expecting him to be the next biggest thing out of Cleveland, it's just a sad situation on its head, man.